I have received a letter from the honourable member for Deakin proposing that a definite matter of public importance be submitted to the House for discussion, namely this government's failure to take effective action on the cost of living crisis. I call upon those honourable members who approve of the proposed discussion to rise in their places and give the call to the honourable member for Deakin.
Well, thanks very much, Mr Speaker. After 20 months of a Labor government, it is sad to say that Australians are poorer. Australians are poorer after 20 months of a Labor government, and what we've just seen here, a very self-satisfied Treasurer coming in here with his grin and a Prime Minister looking very happy with himself, is clearly they are disconnected from the pain being felt by households throughout this country. Mr Speaker, it's not often that after nearly 2 years of a new government that anyone has been able to stand up and say that people in Australia are now poorer than they were when the Labor Party came to government. Mr Speaker, the average household in this country has seen a loss of $8,000. $8,000. Now, that is the average household. It doesn't include households with a mortgage. And we know that if you've got a mortgage, that it's well above $20,000, $24,000 in fact for an Australian family with an average mortgage. That's how much they are worse off after 2 years of a Labor government. Food's up by nearly 10%. Housing, and this hapless housing minister with no idea, is up by 12%. Electricity is up by 20%. Insurance is up by 22%. And it'll be very interesting to see the next quarter ABS data as Australians start seeing their insurance notices coming through. And of course, gas is up by 27%. Now let's touch on a couple of those, Madam Deputy Speaker. Electricity is up by 20%, gas is up by 27%, but this Prime Minister, for whom the truth is not known to, said on 97 occasions before the election that energy prices for the average house would be down by $275 a year. $275 a year, and he said it on 97 occasions. And how many times, Madam Deputy Speaker, has he said it since the election? 96. Not 96. No, member for Banks. Not 95. No. He has not said it at all. He's not dared repeat his promise that he made to the Australian people of a $275 reduction in power prices. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, we know that the truth is not something that the Prime Minister is particularly familiar with, particularly as we see his recent breaking of faith with the Australian people. But he did say before the election, and we saw the headlines, "Life will be easier under me." Life will be easier under me was the catch cry from the Prime Minister. Does any Australian, other than perhaps a union official, believe that life is better for them after 20 months of a Labor government? The statistics prove that that is not the case. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, we now have a huge admission from the government, a massive admission from the government of the disaster that has befallen the Australian community. Today we see a very belated, and only once they were forced into it, a belated announcement of $14.4 million of additional funding for food relief agencies, and we welcome that very belated commitment. But if things are going so well in this country as the Treasurer who sits there with his supercilious smile and the Prime Minister who laughs all through question times, if things are going so well, why on earth are our food banks around the country busting at the seams, Madam Deputy Speaker? Every single person in this place knows that in their own communities our food banks are seeing families and individuals whom they have never seen before. They're seeing people with full-time jobs. They're seeing two-parent working families who are only able to make ends meet if they come to their food bank. So, on one hand, if you look at the scoreboard and the results of 20 months of a Labor government, we've got food banks busting at the seams, and we say thank you for this very belated and late-coming $14.4 million commitment. But, interestingly, On the same day that we see a $14.4 million commitment to food relief, which, let's be frank, won't even touch the sides for our food banks around the country, we see another commitment from this government where highlights, colleagues, where their priorities are at. Last night, in Senate estimates, we see that the Finance Minister confirmed that the government's going to spend $40 million advertising their broken promise on stage 3 tax cuts. $40 million for an advertising campaign, $14 million for our food banks busting at the seams around this country, $40 million for high-end political consultants and advertising agency types to put an advertising campaign, and $14 million for food banks. That says everything you need to know about the modern Labor Party, everything you need to know about how disconnected they are from the communities in which we all serve. Well, on this side of the House, we are the true representative of working and middle Australia. We are the true people who stand up for the people that you have crushed over 20 months. And it goes further, Madam Deputy Speaker. The people that are being crushed by this government, sadly, is anybody renting, anybody trying to save for a home, anybody, quite frankly, who's trying to put a roof over their head. And what have we got? We've got a so-called housing minister who's got no idea what she is doing and clearly does not have any sway within that caucus. Because on one hand, we've got record low vacancy rates, we've got housing approvals at lows we haven't seen for 20 years, we've got first home buyers at their lowest levels since the Gillard government, we've got fewer homes being built than we can remember. And at that time, with that suite of statistics, we see the Labor government bringing in 520,000 migrants last calendar year. 520,000 migrants with absolutely no idea where those people are going to live. So what does the government do? The government comes out and says, well, we're going to commit to a housing target of 1.2 million homes over the next 5 years, starting from the 1st of July this year. So 2 years after we've been in government, we'll make a commitment. Well, what did we see this week, Madam Deputy Speaker? We saw the HIA, the NBA, blow the lid on this 1.2 million homes commitment. What did we hear? The Labor government's only going to miss it by 400,000. Only 400,000. 400,000 homes short, based on approval data that we see today. So that's not missing it by this much. A 1.2 million home commitment is going to be missed by 400,000. And guess what happens during that same period? We ramp up migration, 1.5 million migrants over 5 years. How on earth can you, in good conscience, bring in 1.5 million migrants with no idea of where they are going to live, which drives up the housing costs of Australians throughout this country? We believe on this side of the House that Australia should never get to a point where young, hard-working Australians don't have a realistic prospect of owning their own home. And we know the government's waved the white flag. What the government wants is foreign corporates, foreign multinationals owning our housing stock. And how do we know that? Well, because they've just given a big tax cut through their build-to-rent tax cuts to foreign funds to own homes in Australia. Now, it will be very ironic. It will be very ironic if, on one hand, we've given a tax cut to foreign corporates to build homes in Australia, but we'll seek to smash mum and dad investors by abolishing negative gearing. And let's be frank, Madam Deputy Speaker, we know that's what they're going to do. We know it's what they're going to do. Just as you said on hundreds of occasions, we've got no plans to change Stage 3. We have not considered it. We've got no plans. We have not modelled it. We'll hear the same denials in coming months. We'll hear the same denials from the Prime Minister. We've got no plan to change negative gearing. We'll hear that from the Prime Minister. And so the irony will be that on one hand we smash mum and dads who want to get a leg up, want to build for their retirement, and will give a tax cut to foreign corporates to own thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of homes in this country. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, this government has failed on every measure, and shame on them for walking into this chamber looking so satisfied with themselves, while the people of this country, including the people in the gallery, are doing it so tough.